43 days, 0 families. Two 200-pound Boerboels waited inside a shelter while the world kept walking past their kennel. 19 people stopped, every single one of them left without signing a paper. Too big, too much, too intimidating. Then one woman walked in to drop off a donation and heard a sound that stopped her cold. What happened next proved every single one of those 19 people wrong. Sarah Mitchell was 34 years old, lived alone in a second-floor apartment in Columbus, Ohio, and owned exactly 0 large dogs in her entire life. She had strong opinions about small dogs, extensive, well-researched, deeply personal opinions. Her last dog had been a 7-pound Cavalier King Charles Spaniel named Biscuit, who slept on her pillow for 12 years and never once required a paper towel. She had a system. A life that fit neatly inside her 900 square feet. She was not looking for a dog. On a Tuesday afternoon in October, her neighbor forwarded her a fundraiser link for Maplewood Animal Rescue. Sarah figured she'd drop off a check in person, maybe take a look at the cats. She'd be in and out in 15 minutes. That was her plan. The call had come in 6 weeks earlier. A commercial breeding operation had been shut down overnight. 47 dogs, deplorable conditions, and among them 2 Boerboels that nobody quite knew what to do with. They arrived at Maplewood in the back of a transport van, pressed against each other the way they'd been doing it their whole lives, because they had. Milk was the lighter one, pale fawn coat, deep-set eyes that seemed to carry the weight of every cold concrete morning he'd ever survived. Around 200 pounds, the kind of dog that makes a doorframe look small. Caramel was darker, broader across the chest, with a jaw that could make a grown man take 2 steps back without a single word being spoken, also around 200 pounds. Together, they weighed more than most refrigerators. The shelter staff looked at them and made what seemed like an obvious call. Separate kennels, standard protocol for large dogs from unknown backgrounds. That was their first mistake. Within 20 minutes, the entire east wing of the shelter knew it. Milk started first, a low, rolling sound that wasn't quite a bark and wasn't quite a howl. Something older than that, something that came from deep in his chest, from a place where all the months of wire fences and strange hands and cold floors had settled into something wordless and heavy. Caramel answered immediately, back and forth, like 2 people finishing each other's sentences in a language nobody else could understand. The staff tried everything: blankets that carried each other's scent, kennels placed side by side, a volunteer named Patrice who sat between them for 2 hours straight, reading out loud from a paperback novel, hoping her voice might calm them. Nothing worked. For 11 days, they did not stop. On the 12th day, Brenda Walsh made the call. She opened Milk's kennel, walked him down the hall, and placed him inside Caramel's. The howling stopped in 4 seconds flat. Milk walked in, sniffed Caramel once, nose to tail, then turned 2 slow turns and lay down directly on top of him. Caramel didn't flinch. He just dropped his massive head across Milk's back and exhaled, the longest, heaviest breath anyone in that building had heard from a dog. From that moment on, the rule was simple. They were a package deal, together or not at all. Weeks passed. Families came through on weekends, couples with yards, retirees looking for a companion, the occasional young family who'd done their research. Every single one of them stopped at the kennel, looked at 2 enormous dogs sleeping tangled together like a pile of warm laundry, and kept walking. "Too much dog," one man said, not unkindly, just honestly. "We'd need a bigger house," a woman laughed, pulling her husband away. 43 days, not one signature. That was the moment Sarah walked in. She handed her envelope to the front desk, turned to leave, and then she heard it. Not howling, they weren't doing that anymore, just a sound. A single, low rumble from somewhere down the hall, the kind you feel in your sternum before you actually hear it with your ears. Sarah stopped walking. "What was that?" Brenda looked up from her computer. "That's Milk and Caramel, Boerboels. You probably don't want to." Sarah was already walking toward the sound. She found them in the last kennel on the left. Milk was sitting upright, chin lifted, watching her approach with the calm, unblinking assessment of someone who has seen a great many things and is not easily impressed. Caramel was lying behind him, but his eyes tracked her from the moment she turned the corner. Brown, steady, extraordinarily alert. Sarah stood at the gate for a long moment. "They're enormous," she said. "Yes," Brenda agreed. "What do they eat?" And that was the beginning. For the next 40 minutes, Sarah asked every question she had. How much food? 6 to 8 cups a day each. Exercise? At least an hour, ideally more. Vet costs for dogs this size? Brenda didn't sugarcoat it. Whether they'd ever shown aggression, whether apartment living was realistic, whether their bond was the kind that would make separation traumatic. That last question answered itself. While they were talking, Milk had pressed his entire face against the kennel gate and was resting his chin on the metal bar at approximately Sarah's shoulder height, watching her with the patient, unblinking focus of someone who has already made a decision and is simply waiting for the human to catch up. Caramel stood up, walked to the front of the kennel, sat directly behind Milk, and placed his chin on top of Milk's head. 400 pounds of dog, stacked like a totem pole, staring at one woman who came in to drop off a check and look at cats. Sarah looked at Brenda. Brenda looked at Sarah. "I'll take them. Both of them. What do I need to sign?" "I see you're still watching but haven't subscribed yet. Honestly, that breaks my heart a little bit. Hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to see where this goes." The first night was, in Sarah's own words, a complete atmospheric event. She'd ordered 2 large orthopedic dog beds the afternoon she signed the papers, king-sized, memory foam, the kind advertised with photos of calm, dignified dogs resting peacefully. By 11 p.m., both beds were completely untouched. Milk had claimed the couch, all of it, stretched lengthwise, back legs dangling off the armrest, front paws crossed with the composed elegance of someone who had always intended to live this way. He was snoring before Sarah finished brushing her teeth. Not a gentle snore, the kind that rattles window frames, the kind that made her check twice that she hadn't accidentally adopted a small motorcycle. Caramel had taken the bed, not the dog bed, Sarah's bed. When she came out of the bathroom, he was occupying roughly 2/3 of the queen mattress, lying diagonally, eyes already closed, expression utterly peaceful. He had left her a strip of approximately 14 inches along the left edge. Sarah stood in the doorway for a full 30 seconds. Then she gently placed her hand on Caramel's shoulder and said very clearly, "Move over." Caramel opened one eye, considered her, closed it again. The conversation was over. By the end of the first week, Sarah had lost the couch, the bed, her favorite armchair, and her ability to eat dinner without a 200-pound chin resting at the table beside her. Caramel had developed his own greeting style, leaning into strangers with the full weight of his body, enough to make a grown adult stagger sideways, tail hammering the air the entire time. It was, objectively, the funniest thing Sarah had ever witnessed in her life. Some stories don't need a crisis to be worth telling. Sometimes love is just a couch that no longer belongs to you, a bed you share in 14-inch increments, and a drool situation that has fundamentally reorganized your relationship with kitchen surfaces. But this story wasn't finished yet. 3 weeks after bringing them home, Sarah had a hard day. A colleague she cared about had been let go without warning. She'd sat in a meeting where nobody said what needed to be said, and driven home in silence. She came through the front door, set her keys on the counter, walked to the kitchen floor, and sat down. Not on a chair, on the floor, the way you do when you're too tired to explain it and too worn down to pretend otherwise. Milk came in first. No jumping, no barking. He lowered his 200-pound frame down beside her, settled his enormous head into her lap, and simply stayed there, heavy and warm and completely still. Then Caramel came. He pressed himself against her other side, all of his weight forming a wall of warmth she hadn't asked for and desperately needed. Sarah sat on that kitchen floor at 7:38 p.m. on a Thursday, wedged between 400 pounds of dog, and felt, for the first time since she'd moved into that apartment alone, like the room was full. These are the moments that don't make it onto adoption profiles, the ones nobody can promise you, the ones you only find out about after you sign the papers and drive home and watch 2 enormous animals reorganize your entire life around the fact that you exist. Some stories are worth sharing, not because they end dramatically, but because they're true. From that evening on, the routine settled in. Every morning at 6:20 a.m., Milk walked to Sarah's bedroom door and exhaled. Not a bark, not a whine, a single enormous theatrical exhale that rattled the door in its frame. Her alarm. Every morning, without fail. Caramel's method was different. He would locate Sarah's left shoe, always the left, never the right, carry it carefully to the kitchen, and place it next to his food bowl. The message was clear: I'm ready for breakfast. Bring the other shoe and let's go. The neighbors knew them within 2 weeks. The elderly man on the third floor, Mr. Hargrove, who had been terrified of large dogs his entire life, started leaving treats on his welcome mat. The kids from apartment 4B made a sign for the mailbox that said, "Milk and Caramel live here." Strangers who'd crossed the street to avoid them in the first week were stopping to crouch down and let Milk lean his entire face into their hands. 400 pounds the shelter called too much, the neighborhood called them theirs. If you're thinking about adopting not just a dog, but a bonded pair, an overlooked animal, something that doesn't fit neatly into someone else's idea of manageable, please take the time to learn what they need. Talk to people who understand them. Be ready to give not just your home, but your kitchen floor on a bad Thursday. Because Sarah didn't rescue Milk and Caramel. Not really. She walked in to drop off a check, and they rescued her. 43 days, 0 families, until one woman stopped walking. Would you have opened your door to 400 pounds of bonded pair, or would you have kept walking? Tell me in the comments.